The wind does not forgive here.
In the deep, forgotten forests of Eastern Europe, the trees stand like silent sentinels, guarding a graveyard of iron.
If you walk far enough, past the beaten paths, past the modern roads, you will find them. They are half buried in the earth, consumed by moss, their steel skeletons twisting into the roots of ancient oaks.
These are not just machines. They are the frozen echoes of a world on fire.
80 years ago, the ground beneath your feet shook with the roar of their engines.
80 years ago, these metal beasts carried the hopes of empires, the desperation of soldiers, and the terrible weight of war.
We often think of World War II in terms of tanks and planes, the Tigers, the Spitfires, the Mustangs. But the war was not won by the machines that shot. It was won by the machines that moved. It was won by the strange, ugly, magnificent trucks that conquered the mud, the sand, and the snow.
Today, we are going to open the heavy doors of history. We are going to wipe the dust off the dashboard and look into the souls of the 10 strangest, most abandoned military trucks ever built.
From the wooden cabins that saved Russia to the armored sci-fi giants of America, these are the forgotten titans.
Welcome to the arsenal.
To understand the first ghost on our list, you must first understand the cold.
Not the cold you feel when you step outside in winter, but a cold so absolute it snaps steel like glass. 1941.
The German invasion of Russia has stalled.
The Blitzkrieg, the lightning war that relied on speed, has hit a wall.
But it wasn't a wall of concrete, it was a wall of mud.
The Russians called it the Rasputitsa, the season without roads.
The magnificent German trucks, built for the paved highways of France, were useless here.
Their wheels spun helplessly in the sludge, sinking deeper with every revolution.
The army was starving. The ammunition was stuck miles behind the lines. Hitler's generals were in a panic.
They needed a miracle.
They needed something that could float over the mud.
Enter the Raupenschlepper Ost, or the RSO.
Look at it.
It is one of the strangest silhouettes of the war.
It doesn't look like a military vehicle. It looks like a shed mounted on tank tracks.
It was crude. It was ugly.
It was slow. But in the frozen hell of the Eastern Front, beauty meant survival, and the RSO was beautiful.
The soldiers called it the caterpillar.
It stripped away everything unnecessary.
No comfort.
No speed.
Just a Steyr V8 engine and a set of wide tracks designed to spread its weight so perfectly that it exerted less pressure on the ground than a human foot. Imagine being a German soldier in that winter. The wind is howling at 40 degrees below zero. You are hungry. You are freezing. And then, out of the blinding white snow, you see this boxy little shape crawling towards you. It is bringing bread. It is bringing bullets. It is bringing letters from home. To those men, this strange, vibrating little tractor was an angel made of iron.
Today, thousands of them lie rusting in the marshes of Ukraine and Russia.
Hikers find them often. Tracks thrown, cabins crushed, the metal returning to the earth.
They are the monuments to a desperate gamble that failed, silent witnesses to the moment the tide of war turned cold.
But while the Germans were building complex solutions for their problems, the Americans were doing what they do best: mass production of pure reliability.
Yet the next truck on our list is a strange anomaly.
It is an American hero that America didn't want.
The Studebaker US-6.
If you look at the history books of the U.S. Army, you will see Jeeps, you will see GMC trucks. You will rarely see the Studebaker.
Why?
Because its engine was unique, and the U.S. military didn't want to complicate their supply lines with different parts.
But this machine was too good to waste. It was a beast.
A 6x6 monster with a Hercules engine that could drink the lowest quality fuel and keep running.
It was built like an anvil,
Simple, heavy, and unbreakable. So, through the Lend-Lease Act, America sent them away. They sent them to the one place that needed toughness more than anything, the Soviet Union. And the Soviets fell in love. To a Red Army driver used to the primitive, breaking down Russian trucks, the Studebaker was like a spaceship.
It had a heater. It had gears that shifted smoothly. It could carry loads that would break a Russian truck in half.
It became the backbone of the Soviet advance.
But its legacy is darker. The Soviets took these American trucks and mounted their most terrifying weapon on the back, the Katyusha rocket launchers.
Stalin's organs.
When you see footage of those screaming rockets lighting up the Berlin sky, look closely at the truck underneath. It's American steel. It is a strange irony of history that the vehicle which carried the hammer and sickle to victory was made in South Bend, Indiana. Today, finding a Studebaker is rare in the West, but in the deep forests of Russia, they are still there. Rusted frames poking out of the swamps, the American markings faded but visible, a testament to a strange alliance that defeated fascism. As the war dragged on, the designs became more desperate, more specialized, and frankly, more bizarre. We move now to a machine that defies categorization.
Is it a motorcycle?
Is it a tank? It is the SD.
Kfz-2, better known as the Kettenkrad. If you saw this vehicle in a sci-fi movie, you would say the design was unrealistic. But it was very real, and it was born from a very specific need. Die deutschen Parajäger, die Fallschirmjäger, waren Elitetruppen, die hinter feindlichen Linien gedroppt wurden. But once they landed, they were foot soldiers. They couldn't carry heavy guns or supplies. They needed a vehicle that could be dropped with them. The answer was this mechanical chimera. The front half is a motorcycle with handlebars and a single wheel. The back half is a miniature tank with complex overlapping tracks. It looks like a toy, but do not be deceived. This was a serious machine with a serious engine. It could crawl through mud that would swallow a Jeep. It could weave through dense forests where a truck would get stuck. It was nimble, fast, and incredibly strong for its size. Towards the end of the war, as the Luftwaffe introduced the world's first jet fighters, the Me-262, they faced a problem. The jets burned fuel so fast that they couldn't taxi to the runway without wasting precious gas. So they used the Kitten plan. Picture this scene. The most advanced aircraft in the world, a futuristic jet, being towed by a strange motorcycle tank hybrid. It encapsulates the madness of the Nazi war machine, high technology mixed with desperate improvisation. Today, the Kettenkrad is one of the most sought-after military vehicles by collectors. But many were left behind. In the old barns of France and Belgium, farmers used them as tractors for decades after the war. Beneath the hay and the rust, the heart of a war machine still beats, a reminder of a time when engineers were told to build the impossible, and they did. Desperation is the mother of invention, but sometimes it is the mother of monstrosities. As the Russian winter ground on, the German logistical nightmare worsened. The RSO was good, but there weren't enough of them. The standard Opel Blitz trucks were still getting stuck. The solution the engineers came up with was almost laughable in its simplicity. They didn't design a new vehicle. They just hacked two existing ones together. They took the Opel Blitz truck, sawed off the rear axle, and welded on the track system from a Panzer I tank. They called it the Maultier, the Mule. It was a fitting name. A mule is a hybrid, a beast of burden, stubborn and ugly. The Maultier was all of these things. It was a Frankenstein monster of logistics. It wasn't fast. Top speed was barely 30 miles per hour. It steered terribly. The drivers had to wrestle with the wheel to get the tracks to turn. But like a mule, it didn't quit. It carried the wounded, the freezing, and the dying through the worst terrain on Earth. When the German army finally collapsed and retreated, thousands of these mules were left behind. They ran out of gas. They broke down. They were abandoned on the sides of the frozen roads, creating miles of metal graveyards.
If you explore the remote valleys of Eastern Europe today, you might find a strange axle rusting in the grass, too wide for a truck, too small for a tank.
That is the bone of a mule, a machine built not for glory, but for survival.
From the freezing mud of Russia, we travel to the burning sands of North Africa, and then to the choppy waters of the English Channel.
The war was global, and the terrain dictated the machine.
When the Allies prepared to invade Europe, they faced a seemingly impossible problem. How do you get millions of tons of supplies from a ship anchored at sea, across the water, over the sand, and onto the road without stopping?
If you stop to unload at a dock, the enemy will bomb you. You need a continuous flow. You need a truck that can swim.
Enter the GMC DUKW.
The soldiers, with their dark humor, called it the Duck. It was a masterpiece of lateral thinking. It was a 6-wheel drive truck encased in a boat-like hull.
It had a propeller at the back and a rudder.
A driver could drive it off the ramp of a landing ship, plunge into the ocean, steer it through the waves, hit the beach, engage the wheels, and drive straight to the ammo dump.
It sounds simple now, but in 1944, it was revolutionary.
However, it was also terrifying. Imagine being an 18-year-old soldier sitting in an open-topped metal tub, bobbing in the rough Atlantic Ocean with artillery shells splashing around you. The DUKW was slow in the water, a sitting duck literally.
If a wave hit it wrong, it would swamp and sink like a stone, taking its cargo and crew to the bottom. The ocean floor off the coast of Normandy is littered with them. Silent graves filled with rifles, radios, and the bones of brave men.
On land, they were awkward and wide, but they saved the invasion.
Without the Duck, the supply chain would have broken.
It is a strange, amphibious legacy, a truck that conquered the ocean.
While the Americans focused on versatility, the British focused on raw, unadulterated power. In the deserts of North Africa, recovery was a nightmare. If a tank hit a mine or flipped in a ditch, how do you move 30 tons of dead weight in shifting sand?
Ye call the Scammell Pioneer.
This truck was a dinosaur.
It looked ancient even when it was new. It had a massive boxy nose, a chain drive system that rattled like a factory, and tires so big they looked like they belonged on a tractor.
It was incredibly slow.
But its torque was earth-shattering.
The Scammell didn't drive. It marched. It could pull a disabled tank up a cliff face. It could drag a bomber out of a swamp. It was the brute force of the British Army. But brutes are often left behind when speed is required. During the frantic retreats in the early years of the war, and later as the front lines moved rapidly across Italy and France, many pioneers were abandoned. They were too slow to keep up.
In the deserts of Libya, you can still find them. Bleached white by the sun, stripped of their rubber, but the massive iron frames remain untouched by 80 years of sandstorms.
They stand like monuments to a simpler time of engineering, where the solution to every problem was just to add more steel. We return now to the Soviet Union to witness a tragedy of materials.
We have talked about steel, but what happens when you run out of it?
The Soviet ZIS-5 is perhaps the most heroic truck of the war, not because of what it was, but because of what it wasn't. It wasn't advanced.
It wasn't armored.
As the war consumed Soviet resources, the factories stopped using metal for the cabins. They started using wood. Look at the late-war ZIS-5. The doors are made of wooden planks. The roof is canvas. The fenders are bent sheet metal. It was a truck made of sticks and desperation. But this wooden truck saved a city. During the siege of Leningrad, the city was cut off, starving. The only way in was across the frozen Lake Ladada,
The road of life.
Drivers in their wooden ZIS trucks drove across the ice under constant German bombing.
They kept their doors open, not for ventilation, but so they could jump out before the truck sank if the ice cracked.
Thousands of these trucks went through the ice.
They are still down there.
A wooden fleet resting in the black water, preserved by the cold. It is a haunting image, A convoy of ghosts that never reached the shore, their cargo of flour and medicine still waiting in the dark.
Contrast this with the German Krupp Protze. If the ZIS-5 was a peasant workhorse, the Krupp was a thoroughbred. In the early days of the war, during the propaganda reels of the invasion of Poland and France, this was the star.
With its low, sloping hood and 6 wheels, it looked aggressive, fast, and modern.
It was the face of the Blitzkrieg. It carried elite infantry towing anti-tank guns, speeding down paved roads. It represented the arrogance of the early war.
But war has a way of humbling arrogance.
The Krupp was sophisticated, but it was fragile.
It required maintenance.
It required good roads. As the war turned against Germany, as the roads turned to mud and rubble, the Krupp began to die. It wasn't built for the attrition of a defensive war. They were abandoned in droves, replaced by simpler, uglier vehicles. To find a Krupp Protze today is a rare thing.
They are the artifacts of a victory that never happened, the rusted gleams of a 1,000-year empire that lasted only 12.
Finally, we arrive at the giants, the machines that signal the end of the era and the beginning of the future.
The Germans built the Faun L900.
It was less a truck and more a land yacht. It was massive, capable of carrying light tanks on its cargo bed. It had a presence that was almost regal.
But in war, being big makes you a target, and being heavy makes you a liability.
As the bridges of Europe were blown up one by one, the Faun L900 had nowhere to go.
It was trapped by its own size.
Crews were forced to destroy their own magnificent machines, setting them on fire or blowing them up with grenades to prevent capture.
It is a tragic end for such an engineering marvel, to be destroyed by the very men who built it. But if the Faun was a giant, our #1 spot belongs to a monster. The M25 Dragon Wagon. This is without a doubt the strangest and most imposing truck of World War II. Look at it. It doesn't look like it belongs in the 1940s. It looks like an armored vehicle from a dystopian future. The cabin is fully armored with shuttered windows that make it look like a rolling bunker.
It had a massive chain drive system.
It was designed for one purpose, to go where no tow truck should ever go.
The Dragon Wagon was built to rescue tanks from the middle of a firefight.
While bullets pinged off its armored skin, the crew would hook up a burning Sherman and drag it to safety.
It was the ultimate guardian angel.
It consumed fuel at a rate that would bankrupt a small city, and it was so wide it took up entire roads.
Driving it felt like piloting a fortress.
Today, finding a Dragon Wagon is the holy grail for collectors.
In the overgrown junkyards of the Pacific and Europe, you can sometimes see that distinctive armored snout poking out from the vines.
It still looks ready to fight.
It still looks invincible.
It is the fitting king of our list, a machine that turned the humble truck into a weapon of war.
These 10 machines are more than just Mule.
They are the physical remains of human struggle. They tell us that in the face of death, we create.
We build monsters to save us.
As they rust away into the earth, returning the iron to the soil, let us not forget the hands that built them and the men who drove them into the dark. Disclaimer: the narratives presented in this video are based on historical records and technical specifications. Some dramatic descriptions are used for artistic storytelling purposes. All historical footage and images are the property of their respective owners.
This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only.